Sabala Santi Traki Deleye.
So, Tashile wala.
Kini Katsu Nima Nazo hitting call Keji Shebarwa. Ta hitting call the Laja call Roa. Advice call Roa. Shezo Katsu Nazo Sije Jado Niku Zoni Yebi Nondola. Sije Jenga do Chicago Cotizo. Latsa Roa. Ta diri Dinema Mutine Laya is. Shidon Chimba Pomonte Sole Laja Jela. Tense gu yeri se labarwa. Ta tense ngaba tenle de yerwa. This one.
La. Okay, so hello everyone, welcome to today's session. So we've been discussing the text Letter to a Friend by Nagajuna, which consists of advice, basically. And out of the maybe I got the number wrong, 112 verses.
122.
122, sorry. Yeah, that's my bad. Out of 122 verses, we've already covered 16 verses. So we'll continue on from there. And currently we're at this part where Nagarjuna is giving practical advice to householders in 9 parts. And we're currently at the 5th part of those.
Oh, la so. Aya. Mi kage jindoe.
La.
Mi le doe.
Do. Ni sumsto.
Ya. Ta deri roa. Laja tuba ko de la le doa householder la.
So now we're getting to the 6th piece of advice for householders.
Shezanta lunga yisunk. Shawa shidong ko de hindoa. Pena senki mige sono. Cheshuk korke jindu. Ngoki keje ketong korke jindu. Luki shelan shitong korte so tone. Any advice so jindu.
So here the advice is concerning one's behavior, how one conducts oneself with body, speech, and mind. So what sort of thinking the mind engages in, what kind of words one speaks, and how one carries out different physical activities.
Shezonta dilon dombo mige sono chetong mige sono tongtong korte la. Any ndamenda son. Tende shedong nonju yeres. De pedon jani ke jindu. Sen chodon sadon doa la. Remote ba tenda riba je. Teno nyemo jen la tombo ne. Chode chende no la tama lao sele. Tatsi je chuden pa te ke jindu wa. Shezon mi ge sono tongtong kute la. Peden do ja shene keba ina. Ane ndamenda son tenden dus. Tombo ngote shene. Ane sono tongsho yasho de kare yinba. Teso ngote shene. Ane ta ludu kitso jabu deshi zombo la. Kecha teso shene. Ane jene ngaron so ta kangali he yindu.
So starting off then with the mind, with thinking, this next verse, verse number 17, speaks about what kind of ways of thinking there are. So there are 3, basically, 3 ways of thinking. And it first introduces these different ways of thinking and then says which is the ideal one, right? So I'll read out the verse. Understand your thoughts to be like figures drawn on water, sandy soil, or carved in stone. Of these, for tainted thoughts, the first's the best, while when you long for Dharma, it's the last.
Pena nga zo chuli remote yaki, sala remote yaki, dola remote yaki, tende remote le ndamra sonda buji yeres. Ane chuli remote yade loso meba chawgirwa. Ane sala remote bate teze tele tembo chea yerwa. Ta dola remote ga wade hiboji ko tembo yeres. Te noshin ngaro sogi sono tonsho tela, en tena noshin son yeres. Tempo juni mejo, tempo teze yeba, ani hindu tempo yeba. So,
So, as we all understand, then drawing or writing on water leads to that drawing simply disappearing immediately. Versus if you draw something in sand, it might stay around for a while, but still it's not really that reliable. And then on the other hand, the third example is carving something in stone. This is very, very long lasting. So then in the same way, we have three kinds of thoughts. We have some thoughts that are very fleeting. They just pop up and then immediately vanish. Some that stick around for a little bit longer, and then some that are really, really stable and that might stick around for a long time in the mind.
tapena remote nda munda son yeba noshin ngaron tsoge thought de la yon nda munda son nanju yeres.
So, like in this example, there are three different kinds of drawings, right? There are three different kinds of thoughts as well.
Yazon tate indu thought nda munda sumbo de thought yasho nda bo de karere, thought kandeji gugire lana, ani nyamo chin la tombo sedu. Dejo kondro nga jog thought le waina chula remote trise no shi gugire so losong so meba chando yaji ani te yabu hiro res.
Therefore, out of these three kinds of thoughts, if it is a thought that's associated with the negative emotions like anger and desire, the best is to have that thought be like a drawing on water.
O tate karsena ta noto ngimba deso eli yabu meba. Ani deso noto ngimba tende soso jelle waina ani losong meba zona yabu res ke de ke yero.
So negative thoughts are not good for us. So if we have negative thoughts, then it's good if we're able to immediately get rid of them, if they immediately vanish just upon arising.
O tende like tene cho de chinde no la tamalo sidu. Ta sono tonsho yabu de positive excellent thought nda wujina ani tachi dugugindu lega yabu zogugindu mela fenta gugindu sono yabu tongu senda woteso ani dola remote wanda wujina yabu yereste tembo gugire segi solid tete chuli remote banda wodo sala remote banda wena ani hera pento gi mares koswa.
So then in the same way, if we consider the case with positive thoughts, such as wanting to practice the Dharma, wanting to help others, or do something beneficial, the best would be if these thoughts are very stable, just like a drawing in stone, carving something in stone. If our thoughts of doing something beneficial or of practicing Dharma are just like drawings made in the sand or on water, then it's not really going to do all that much.
Tende imba indu dollar remote triga ba tende lo jaso karung de yero ten noshin ta semba zombo sono yabu positive teso pe tembo diri ye soni meba ta mai ba danda meba ta ba mai ba non tona ani tuta do yeba ji zotu gugire la ba.
Therefore, just like a drawing made on the surface of hard rock, this is how our positive thoughts, our positive aspirations should be. This is the best case, that they are really stable and that they stay with us for a long time.
Kezonta soso ge remote so kol sono tonne ani tanda de tu ja shewa ina ani le labu tone ko de tu gires.
So then, when we think about these examples and relate them to our own thoughts, our own states of mind, it'll be easy for us to understand why this makes sense.
Ta de ke sono tonsho ge korte so peden jane he tsane ani sije choje pa te ke ngo ke keja he ton korte so ke abre.
So now, having explained verse number 17, we'll go on to number 18, which describes how one should speak and what kind of speech there are.
Chezan ta dawe ni la ba don den ba don lobar ma de che non jine bonzi me do maison tabuti non son kaza tele tama fonce la gindoa ta de gar la yer lana keja shebe ki kasula kedon denda manda sunde peden jani ke yin la war.
This comment. Excuse me. You could mute your sound because there's a little bit of echo right now. I can't really hear. The sound is it makes it a little bit difficult to hear right now. Kimberla.
And this one
Yang suna na komas yapo komas.
nga zo keja je hedon de la ndamanda sun yeris peden jani ke yere titule any keja hedon kola advice zo yere.
So this verse is then describing three different ways of speaking, the three different ways one can classify speech, and gives advice based on that.
De soje chonden de ki sun yero ta jawe la na soje ke la ro ni la fa don demba don loban ma den shibu non ji du keja hedon ji saso ki san la lo la baba ke kor hedon ji yeres keja hedon ji demba tombo gone heba ji yeres ji demba tobo meba hesa meba kende gone si tobo gone tende sun yeres
So the verse reads, right? Three kinds of speech are used by humankind, and these the victor variously described. Like honey, sweet; like flowers, true; like filth, improper speech. The last of these eschew. So here, the victor refers to the Buddha. So this is something that the Buddha himself spoke about. So we can understand these three speaking to be speaking pleasantly, speaking truthfully, and speaking in a way that neither of those is not relevant and not nice to listen to.
Shezontate indu Nila papa sedu anju lendoa keja de nyende yeba sain landoa ki keja hie gurila neta keja positive kol hie guyerita te yon karse respect to chep gone tende keja hie watela ene nila papa keja hie don la ya tere la.
So sweet speech here then refers to something that is pleasant to hear, words that people like to hear, something that is positive and respectful, basically.
ene demba mawa demba keja hie se de respect zone Tzitzebo mai bigi tindula keja tombo hebatela la yer.
So then second kind here then would be truthful speech. So it's important to note here that this is speech that is true and respectful, and not using harsh words.
Ani loba mawa seate keja demba yon mahe respectful yon maze ani tzitzebo mombu gone harsh word tone keja hedeate la yer.
And the third kind then, improper speech is speech which is not true. It is not spoken in a respectful way, but rather with many harsh words that are unpleasant to listen to for people.
Keson tate pedos jadu tombo keja heton tombo de ronzi do chipares ronzi te ngamu yerwa ani memonchea de la gagirwa oda teri. Ani nipa de medo noshin res medo de misul inayon ko semba tobo zoyero me shubole semba tobo zoya tombole mazo wanda yemara ko tombo kibonda yero jeson da medo do chibares ani tamade mezonwa zobo tuma toya noji tuma tongela michio gagi mara o tendenda bores ta desol sono dona ani keje hedon de nengo chibu jimba ka chibu jimba ha kutugires la smar.
But then three examples are given for each of these kinds of words or speech. First, speaking sweetly or pleasantly is likened to honey. Honey is sweet and everyone likes it, basically. The second, truthful speech, is likened to flowers. So most everyone likes flowers. When you give them flowers, they become happy. So this is what this kind of speech is like. And then the third, improper speech, which has a lot of harsh words and is not true, is like filth, which is disgusting and repulsive to everyone.
Karsana tendon rabu de ngazu keje ji guna keja yabo nimbo here de kachiburis any sozuki tendo de lutugiris any keja tombo here de kachiburis any tendo tatuba de lugiris any keja hedon yabo maje keja tombo make tsitsubo shinela shewaina any mitisu nyegi maris teni kareina ungi maris cheso tate nengo jiris le luduke jabu deje zombola ne any jin engaron sola soe baji kogu yerta.
So the advice boils down to this, that if we speak to others, or when we speak to others, we should speak pleasantly, respectfully, and truthfully. If we do that, then we can achieve whatever we set our minds to achieve. Otherwise, if we speak in a way that is not truthful, not respectful, and unpleasant to listen to, then no one is going to listen to us and we're not going to get anywhere. We're not going to achieve our goals in life. So this is Nagajuna's advice then.
That ngog keja hedong kor peden jani hieswa. That sije choje pate hi ani luhi shenlong shidong kor te hi yeri luhi legal ledong kor. Ata tela karse rin nga manda yil ungiri se yon peden jani hi yeri.
Chugurwa.
Choje indo. Oh, chuguru.
Oh, that's it.
19.
Mhm. So this was then verse number 18, which discusses
19, I think.
And now we're going to get to verse number 19, which talks about physical activities, physical ways of acting, basically.
Tade damra yeris none nowe tatu mumbane mumbu tatu none muntatu mune nowe tatu konzone yite teda noji tambo zese la shebarwa shezan tade karsedu kaye tambo ne lega yabo zonki shenlong yabo zonki ti yeris yon te muntene shenlong yabo zole tende donki riki yeris yon kaye roa karse 다 이 샹람데 농기 생게 손노 동소 근데 야보 예발아요 시 샹로 두부시네 레가 랭기 지레스 요지 시 샹로 데페 두자 임발아 농기 생게 손노 동도 레가 시조 나보 예로 왔다때 야보 랭기 지레스 근데 요지 시기 셰바 야보 메바 농기 손노 야보 메기텐데 공소텔라 린다문다 예예레스 달래가 레동 가스 세일다 te kosaru
Mm.
ena
So
minga gaje tombo ne laga yabo lele ani tanda yabo chao denki pembo chao denki shubo chao denki kedo chibo chao denki jiris tene de yo munte ne laga yabo shene yo ko mao ba yo de ga rong lu ben yabo tongki giri ji yeris tene da wo he yir
so here the verse reads, "Some there are who go from light to light, and some whose end from dark to darkness still, while some from light to dark or dark to light end up thus four of these be as the first." So starting out then just talking about the different kinds of people who act in certain ways. There are four different kinds, right? Some start out doing good, acting in a positive way, and they continue doing good things. This is sort of their trajectory, right? Some people, on
tishena
the
de
other hand,
mendo
Lasa,
beginning also mikage beginning la start yo positive nezo and bune positive nezo ke giri tende ji yeris
Lasa,
paji tende de he jana tendo yoga isare
Lasa, Lasa. Some people start out life positively and they also end life positively. Some start negatively and then their life is also concluded in a negative way. And then there are also the two kinds of those who start out good but then end up in a negative state later on, or those who start out negatively in a difficult way and then um, their situation is improved at the end of their lives, right?
ta
So,
tende
for
ndam
example,
that
um, like Chiklado, Sumba Chiklado.
Lazarus,
So
Jesino.
then Kempola use the example that for the first kind, right, there are some people who start out with quite a good reputation, with resources, they may be wealthy, healthy, prosperous, and then they continue in that way. So this is one way to understand it, right? Lasso.
So that the kasi luki shenlong shidong damada yishun suwa ani tan damada yikino yashu de karere se tewa jili yirwa shezon yashu de tombo de res start la yo positive she end la positive she tombo yako lega lewa ina maung pa na yo yapo chondo luki shenlong shidong de yashu de titol ndo towa shigure se luduge jabo de shi zombo la sonare ta ngazo la yirwa.
So then, having described these four, the question then becomes, which is the best? Which is the one we should opt for? Well, the best is the first one. In our physical activities, we should endeavor to start out positively and conclude positively as well. This is the best way of acting. This is what Nagajuna's advice is. I think everyone understands this if we simply think about it. Now we get to verse 20.
Miteso to topo diguna ani topo di shibashia de nengores ani mi kandeji chane topo digres ya keja jilidu ta mitela rinda mda yo yere shebare human being la four different type of the years ani tino kandeji pick up zone ani topo digusho ko de ye ungere laja de yere ta.
So, verse number 20 is then the seventh piece of advice out of these 9 pieces of advice for householders. And it's about friends. And it's about how it's important to choose our friends carefully and to be able to understand what kind of people there are in the world. And here, the verse speaks about 4 different kinds of people. And basically, we have to be able to distinguish which kind of people there are and then choose our friends and our company accordingly. So the 4 types of people are described by means of using the example of the fruit mango.
The shidonko mango la de food color food no ya show is any te nyona kala kawo yeris tanda ando gende chimbi la indoa karisana kage shilo tana yabo yebala yo nolo yabo me batende ungiris tatende no shin ro shindo de kage no yo sachojo chaba shiyon sachojo chaba no shin no yo sacho sanan diba chaba tende richi yeris yo kage 시대 야부 초대와 논을 산나 만디와 tene 대조 예리스 kage 요 논을 산나 디발라 실로를 산나 디기 메바르기 기텐데기 논신지 예리스 kage 요 논도 신이거 산나 만디바 논신 근데 신도 단다 암텔라 예리스 테논신 미텔라 아니 텐데기 예리스 테가르스도 kage 소노 야부 예발라 요시 셰바 야부 연기지 웅기리스 요 시셰바 예발라 농그 소노 야보 멘키 지우기레스 요 농그 소노 야보 예발라 시소 셰바 야보 멘키 지우기레스 요 이바데 농그 소노 야보메 시 셴로데 야보 멘키 텐데 공서 리우기레스 답변에 자네 제발 텔레라본도와
So basically then mangoes are quite a popular type of food, but as some great scholars have pointed out, it's not that easy to get a good mango. As Gendunchakal would say, right? Because when you look at a mango that you might want to buy, some look ripe on the outside, they look like they're ready to eat, and on the inside, they are actually ready to eat. And then on the other hand, some look ripe, but they're not actually ripe and ready to eat on the inside. Some mangoes look green, like they're not ripe, but they are actually edible. They're actually ripe to eat. And then the fourth case then is that some would look unripe and actually be unripe. So it makes it quite difficult then. So then likening this to people, we can think about how some people have quite a agreeable, good behavior, and their thinking, their mind is also good. They're kind-hearted people. Then some might look very good. Their behavior might look or seem very good, but their way of thinking is actually not all that good at all. And then conversely, some people have behavior that looks very offensive, but they're actually kind-hearted people. Their inside is good. And then there are some people whose behavior looks bad and their inside is bad as well.
그래서 다들 같이 본다 보지를 단다 가족게 보보데 셀레이션 조 마히네 아니 가로 또 강가 못 태기로 제가
So
때
this,
강가 태바 예바 인정 아니 루두게 자보 데시존 볼라 디게 애드바이스 태기로
so this is actually a really important point. It happens often to us in our lives that we get into a lot of problems because we don't know how to choose our friends properly. And this is because we don't know how to be a good judge of character, essentially. So this is why Nagajuna gives this piece of advice to the king, Dechuzampo.
다 대원다 보질레기로 미텔라 텐데 기린다 문다 예나 도보 디사키 미텔라 아니 다 소기 차라 도보 디그레스 야쇼데 소리라나 다 노소노 야보 얘기 시시나 야보 신기 근데 미지 도 투야기 타시시네 아니 도보 디그레스 다 거가 로나 데이터메나 아니 노센나 소노 야보 얘기 시시나 히라 야보 메나 근데지 데이터 넘버 2바 스텐데시네 아니 도보데 셀렉션 조 그레스 레타 루두케 advice 라바레
So then the question comes, right? If there are these four types of people, which kind of person should we choose as our friend? Well, if we have the opportunity, if we can, then we should try to befriend the first type of person, someone who is good in terms of their behavior and someone who is also kind-hearted. Otherwise, the best would be someone who is kind-hearted, even though their behavior, their external behavior maybe is not exactly perfect.
계속 대인도 노를 semba 야보ye 실로 쉐바 야보예나 엔텐데기 미디기 내가 도 타도 이깔라 소소라 happiness 때 두기로와 마도 애니 타테메나 애니 시 논준다므라 땡와이나 요 semba 포양다고 요 노노레 semba 두조시네 레갈레와이나 요 동아 몸보 요고야서 근데 예로와 세선 다 디소노 돈네 희긴도와 디네 다 야쇼레 다 니바데 아니 인지메지 노 semba 야보 얘기 기차라 로봇 디구긴도 알라바리 다 시셰바 히라 야보 메나요 이나 donka 제예나 아니 동보데 야쇼레 라바리
So if we think about it, we can understand how if we befriend someone who is both good in terms of their outer behavior and is kind-hearted, then both in the short term and in the long term, being friends with such a person will benefit us. It'll give us a lot of happiness in our lives. on the other hand, if we befriend someone with a bad behavior and with bad intentions, that will just cause us a lot of trouble and pain. And then, even if we cannot maybe then always choose the first kind of person as our friend, at least we should try to surround ourselves with people who are kind-hearted, with good intentions.
Taina de selection zoala le labo mundua de tuze ngogindoa susuki lebo de peje tongunda pena hindu yoga de nyoguna ente sono tone hindu yoga de nyotoba zogunda sheza tate tiko de hegindoa.
But this is not all that easy. We actually have to be quite smart about this, and it also takes some time. But we have to be clear about our intentions in trying to find the ideal type of person to befriend.
Sheza ta soso bobo tomo diguna loson any chonsa jewa majewa shene te chalndone any ta hakone any zogoyanda wo kejete so ta hul ko gindoa.
미리 딱시 just当为接了的你心尝试了是
다 빼나로와. 다 총사이난다 소소게 best friends 오구난다. 다 치동 샤투바 노시 조야 문다 로송.
So if we want to make someone our best friend, or if we want to take someone as a life partner, someone that we might marry eventually, we shouldn't just rush into such a decision. We should take some time and really try to find out what this person really is like.
다 된단다고 데 가르치기잖아. 소소 semba tobo hiwoyena any tedu decision leya ye mares. 소소 용강가 hiwoyena tedu decision leya ye mares. 근데 두제 닝글 decision kaun lewa yena te nontu legires. semba lele taujenda madna tonsane decision leya te ka chewures yesare. Endo ti
So one important point here then is that if you're extremely happy, you shouldn't rush the decision. And if you're extremely sad and in a lot of trouble, you also shouldn't make a decision about something like this, because in both cases, you might end up making a mistake. In fact, you're likely to make a mistake. Because the best state of mind to have when you're making a decision is to really be kind of relaxed and clear-headed about things.
라자 제바들이 지탱기 라자 제바데 시제 니고 짜지바히 셰인도데.
Now we come to the 8th piece of advice, which is verse number 21.
안데 가서 니만 가서 저한테는 가서 된도데 해도 해 자성로와 다 자부데시 정보 라 보면 라바존라 애니 가서고 자자시구리스 깨지기긴도와 노라 체부조기리스 힌지 주마 메타 토나요 나사 톰바 마동 포모동 시문도히 시지 초조나 메존이도 용도 삼바제셀라긴도와 티칼라세도 다 ngazo ke ngune shewa ina choba ponya la taki kare shigurs na tande nima lojuji yeri tito ne jani he yeri nima jago le jabo kokompa ki jabo se ya jindu ani tene da chamba pundul la se ya gintindu ta koso ni loju tende la he yeri ta de loju de makena yo ndisari ta juri bongo konjero wa ngazo puteso ki chopa de meba zoichidula desire cut down zoichidula tahi kare kare zo gures tike je tike yeri marsana luduki heating hiasa de purwa jabu de purwa shezang ngune shawayna pumi soso chongsa jitsarwa ta jabu de chongsa jitsadu ene megendo chemela mik taya ye maris ngune shuna ta kasi accident da bo chawne thongwa mina ene pumi de ki lo de la sono tonguris lo chebon da bo ride na soso ki mari songuris lo chibanda bo ride na soso ki sister songuris lo chunjunda we na soso ki pomore songuris ene chaba de shegi maris tendege nyolin de zoguris labare ta tombo.
So, um, this this piece of advice is something that we basically discussed a little bit previously in one of the previous sessions during the Q&A. And it's talking about how one, as the man here, then should be careful about how one relates to other women, basically. So the verse then reads, do not gaze on others' wives, but if you do, regard them as your mother, child, or sib, depending on their age. Should lust arise, think well, they are by nature unclean filth. So this story, there's some kind of story actually underlying this verse about a king in the past, but I'm thinking that it would be okay if we don't go into the story too much. It boils down to how, as men, so we have to keep in mind here, Nagarjuna is teaching to a man, right? The letter is sent to his friend, the king. So the advice also applies for women, but from the other point of view, right? But basically, the king has already been married. So then in that case, he shouldn't look at other men's wives, is the advice here, right? But then if he would accidentally end up looking at another man's wife, then according to the woman's age, he should, in order to reduce his desire, think of that woman as either his mother, in the case that she's older, as his child, if she's younger, or as his sibling, if they're about the same age, right?
그래서 다때 총사제 사juk 밑에서라 아니 desire control 시동 그거데 라와로와 답변은 총사자 맹킨다 보던데 이나 아니 뭐모데솔라 따에 말이 가신 통신화이나 아니 로침보이나 아마리 아니 시모리 보모리 선거스 아주 다반다 보이나 준 따에 말이 보모라 가신 통화이나 아니 로라 따셰 돈에 아마리 시모리 보모리 선리 다든데 셴네 아니 차바데 도야라 타히 시구리스 니마 다장바지 보모 제보 모보 통네 아니 자부게 좀모 모보 통네 아니 자부게 제마데솔 제 차바시기문도 조세 가르스도 아니 깨잔데소 셴네 아니 소제 쫀된데게 차바 마시웰리 타히인데 땡예르스 깨제 셴바 노시리
다정박이 양자식 소로는 this 코마서.
다장바 미 제보 히보지에사로와
알레
아니 자부게 좀모데소 코탈 론도와 치니가 깨자니가 가시니가
알레 쯤마텐서 다정박이 기타라 도이르베.
아니 자부데 토도 론도와 아니 자부데 또 론도와 아니 다장바게 저또 론고 마레스 나저 차바시기 마레스 보면 통나 차바 시에나 리기 마레 아니 타히인데 예리스 깨제 히에스 다네 쇼네 디깨제데 쇼마르와 로주트네다고 티톤
알레 상예기 갸포델라와.
Da jamba de jabo de la laso.
Lasso. So this is actually a teaching that came about, um, or well, it's in this context, it's for married people to control their desire. But even, if you're single, you shouldn't necessarily go around looking at women either. Um, so in the same way, you should apply this different graded thinking based on a girl's age, that you might see or look at, right? And for us monks, Kempela was saying we can't look at women at all. It's kind of a rule for us, and if we do, then we should really try hard to think of them according to age in this way, right? In order to not have any desire. So then there's this story, right, that kind of underlies this verse, and the story is that in the past there was this very handsome, very attractive arhat, um, and what would end up happening is that a lot of nuns would go visit him to listen to his Dharma discourses. And then,
No nan
Lasso,
jabo gicheme.
Ale, oh, sorry. I misunderstood the story. So the Arhat was very handsome, and then what would happen is that the king's wife, so the queen, would go listen to the Arhat's discourses, um, and then the king got
Jabo
jealous over this, and so the Arhats told him that you shouldn't be jealous actually, because you should think like this instead. And then this advice came, right?
garsana ngazo soje gi hima sunye res pome la chaba pondong la pome thongwa ina ani ama yin sangre pomo yin sangre setende tahi yeres ani jabo la tanda jabo la ani arahati klaso.
So the Arhat then told the king that no, you shouldn't be jealous, you shouldn't be worried here, because the Buddha has already taught us how to abandon desire for women by this way of thinking of them
Methods.
as this method, right? That we can think of them as either our mother, our child, our daughter, or as our sibling.
Kade penayo kake yero da sosul tomo yero ani tomo ye chana ani tomo himbala tanan digi meba hejindwa ta nyoda zogiro konze kanga majo ba nyoda mazo chidula advice te yero that is make sense zogindwa.
So, you can also just consider the case of having a girlfriend. If you have a girlfriend and you're around your girlfriend, you shouldn't look at other girls. It'll give you a lot of trouble. So this is very practical, sensible advice.
Te chongsa jitsa yena dile chong pumi himbal taya ye mara sozo ki chumal mato. Kasi thongwa yena ini teso ki sono tongne ini chapa mashi wik taki zoguri lawarwa.
So if you're already married, then even more so, you really shouldn't look at other women. And if you do, then you should apply these ways of thinking, apply this method.
Ini ta teso ki taki kanga zone taro desire de control zo tugi mena ini pumi de sobo shibo re sangure lawarita. Ta tuma mombo yere Topandosa, Tadabu Kaira, Mezumbi, Momboji, Tapena Dasbin Dabuji, Sangure Lavar. Taderwa, Jabo de Shezon, Sheba Poteso, Chaba Doichi, the Shebara Mado, Luduk Sheba Poteso Hiera, listener Tesokanga, Sheba Poroa. Madu Pumi, Nahi Marayon, Puteso Petsobores, Yon Puteso, Ripa, a capoeirada. Akoswa, te lagrumado, coso too longer da pomotiso.
So if you still can't control your desire, then the verse says, right, you should think of whoever you're looking at as being very impure. You should think of them as a dustbin or something like that. So this is the method, right? Now we have to keep in mind the context that this is a teaching given to the king, and we can imagine that the rest of the audience, the rest of the recipients of this teaching, they're all men, basically. But then if the listeners, if the audience were female, then you would just say the opposite. You would say that, oh, boys, men are very filthy. They're very disgusting. So, should make a point to mention that. Otherwise, it might be offensive. It might make some feel that this is a biased teaching, right?
Bena pumi chungsa jatsawa ina choga gindo la taya ye maris. Kasi accidentally thongwa ina ini choga digi lo tili toshe tongne lo chimbo ina palo yinsang, lo chungju ina pugu pomo yin, pu yinsang, lo chebo ina brother yinsang le tatinde sigur lawari.
So then we can say that, suppose in the case of a married woman, she is not supposed to look at other women's husbands. If she does happen to glance at another woman's husband, she should see that man as, depending on their age, right? Either being her father, being her son, or being her sibling.
Tati ganga xie chadu, ini tarung riba ki xie yeri ta nga zo ki gen lao teso ki. Ini pume teso ndeki puguri, ndeki pomori sanguris, ini chaba xie yi maris lavari. Ta pu ina pu ndeki purese, pomo ina ndeki pomori tende xie sana, ini teti sono njua ndogiri lavari. Tati teti pengi yejirwa, ta sono tona do pengi rwa, ndela xie girwa mado gabu xie marwa.
So on top of this, in addition to this advice, our teachers would tell us when we were younger that if you still have desire, then let's say maybe it's a girl, then you should think of this girl as being a demon or a ghost, a harmful spirit. And in the same way for a boy, you should think of that boy or that man as being a demon or a ghost or a negative spirit. So it probably helps to reduce one's desire if one thinks in this way. Because typically we don't like demons, right?
Kejan desu ludu ki jabu desi zumba advice le lagoyate desire te ki ngaro su ina kanga hiwoji te yerwa saison ti kanga de mante bichidu la kejan desu ki yer.
So the reason that Nagajuna is giving this piece of advice to the king, Dechizampo, is that desire is something really troublesome, something that causes a lot of trouble and problems in our lives.
Also number soje bagi desire the root cause ki suffering ki root cause res la yero.
Buddhists say that desire is the root cause of suffering, actually.
So ngune shena ride yerita ngaro so ke zombli la kosa don panjor don ta kare ina teso chidula desire hiwoji shena any kanga te de yero.
Gonda, sens.
Mare ngaron son zombli la mitoso ke position don power don kare ina desire ki jene zone any kanga te yero.
In our world, actually, people hunger after things like position and power, and this actually just causes a lot of trouble for them.
Oda tendere tini ta chaba de meba zoya la shuna eni yinda gi chuma la ta ya ye mari kasi thongwa ina lo la ta she tone eni ama don simo don pomo don mezon wa don de gi pugi ba so te so kanga sono tone taro chaba de pon tu gi mena en la ka kare zo gure se tewa ji le girwa 디기 트와디기 레텔라 아니 치제 니고 쫑니 바데 루두 키기레 아니 가서 청거기레
So that's how it is, right? In order to reduce desire, we should try to, in the first place, not look at others' wives, basically, or to whoever. We shouldn't look on anyone that we're attracted to. If you do, then according to the instruction here, then you should see them as, depending on their age, either your mother, your daughter, your sibling. And if that doesn't work, try to see their body as being impure by nature. And if that still doesn't work, then you can try to apply this thinking of them being a demon or a ghost. And if that still doesn't work, well, then there's more advice coming in the next verse.
다 센데 다부 지구레 라바르다 센데 다부 지구레 라바르다
And that is that we have to guard our minds. We have to control our minds.
요이 센데 텐주다 아부 테기 소돈다와 순지테 두바투돈 센자 다오다 메긴 데비델라 이윤제 슬라긴도 요이 센네 텐주다 아부 슬라기도 요이 센나 나르조기 센데 페미시 distraction 공라 로데예레스 셰존타 센데 다부 지구레스도 아니 다부 제동 코르테스 모테 시예레
So the verse reads that guard this fickle mind as you would do your learning, children, treasure, or your life. Renounce all sensual pleasure as if it were a viper, poison, weapon, foe, or fire. So guard this fickle mind as you would do your learning. It's saying here that our mind is very prone to getting distracted. It's very easy for us to get carried away with things. So we really need to make sure that we guard our minds properly. And this verse tells us how to do that.
아 동보데 텐주라나 나조 로종 셴네 로라 존고 조지 예로와 테 나조 마지베기 타힐라 우와 그존에 텐두 존에 템바 마지바 타키 히로 조기로 테 노시 아니 산데 실로레 이 만도와라 아니 템바도 히길레 테네 아니 타키 조구레스 아니 테기 차바 카투기레 라바
So the first example here of learning, we can think about how when we study, there are a lot of facts that we need to keep in mind, some things that we need to memorize. And in order to not forget, in order to really progress in learning, we need to be very diligent and we need to put a lot of effort in whatever we're trying to learn or study. So this focus, this really care when learning means that we're cutting distractions. We're not letting anything interfere. And this then helps actually with cutting desire as well, with getting rid of desire.
kene putabulaginda pena ngaronso pamajila pugi madomena eni pugi de tache bozone dabu jigirwa teno shin samba de yimajiba dabu jigures
And then it says children, right? So for parents, let's say they only have one child, they take a lot of care to treat this child well and to really protect it well. And we have to actually treat our mind the same way.
ini tegilana ngazo jucheboina jur no mombo yena ta nga zo pe misi commando jaba game commando chi de sun sho she dabu jigirwa hotel no she sen de dabu jane any shilole no mando wa tende thagi zo guris.
So then the next example is that of treasure. If we're someone wealthy, we would be on guard for thieves. We might be watchful of thieves. And in the same way, with our mind, we also have to be very careful. We shouldn't let it be distracted.
Yani so don dawa sunwa jisidu sozo ge so tsede baje maunwa ala ngazo ge sunsho shivu shigirawa dolo jen yere, talausa yere, nana mengkong londo yere ta kong taro zo yerawa teno shi shene sen de shilo mando wala ani tahi zo guris.
So then, your life, we all take great care to stay in good health. We wear proper warm clothing, we eat healthy, we go exercise. So we put a lot of effort into maintaining our life. And in the same way, we also have to be really active in taking good care of our minds.
Shezonta nengi chil pena puminda bo gichala teze tende sheba ina any te tanga tegiris tatula pena tu sega badu chibaris tu sha maja tezuki tu sayerwa any satsane any loson kuzu shindo yerwa ta tendenda bo nengi chila nipa mumbundu la yer tele sono tonne any chaba maji wo taki zo kuris.
And then we have to think about how actually being attached, having a lot of desire, is really not good for us. It's actually something like eating poison, something that's toxic and that will slowly deprive you of your health, and that might actually end up killing you. So you have to think in this way also to motivate yourself to get rid of desire.
Pena butterfly ndoa butterfly de chemiki mamiki we de la gabo shene de la chone tita lendone any kono zubo de make tsine hindoya de shunsoa sheza chaba shewa ina any nimi tinde yeris de so ndawole sono tonne tendo ha kotoa shene any chaba de pontoa shiguris.
So we can also consider the idea of, or the example of a butterfly that is, or a moth that's drawn to the light of the flame of a butter lamp or a lit candle. It's drawn to that light because it's attracted to it. But when it gets too close, then its body is burnt and it dies, right? So you should
zoo
Lazo.
te zoo zebo la chaba shibi ki nyime chemi ki we den zebo yerwa any zebo ndu sone chi tsali chine any butterfly kanga de chaba.
So the butterfly or the moth is drawn to the flame because it finds the flame beautiful, but then being drawn by this beauty actually leads it to be burned and to die, right? So being drawn or attracted by beauty has this inherent danger. This is what we should be mindful of.
Ta den no shi bumin rabo shi ban rabo mi du jo ji shi nomban zebo rabo yewa inayo non le yabo meba ji don trainer any sozo gi mesela kanga lenda ongiris sheza chaba shi ye ma stick at the yero.
we could also think about how in our life we might meet someone who is actually ill-intentioned, but who has very good looks. So regardless of whether they have good looks, if you get with someone who is not a kind person, who is ill-intentioned, you're going to have a very difficult life.
Any Chanchalana Tindabut in Derwa Tindabul Nazu Laba Gituna Loso Mazo Girwa Tangate Girwa Nef short Nefla Toch Shena any Kangate Ratenoji Gichila Gavo Shena and Kangate Giridas that naked here that is so except Zotumuto Hamuda.
Then the example goes on here with a weapon, like a knife. If you touch the blade of a knife, it will cut you. It's painful to the touch. It gives us problems, and it's actually the same if we're attached to external things, to the sensory objects, right? But Kempela says, I don't know if you guys, trust this or if you can really accept this truth.
Ini Dao ton lana Dao le Tangazo Debiki yedin le Gabu Shedewade, Dao le Suzula Kanga Tenki til Gabu Shebatu Chiba Chogiris.
Then we should regard it as a foe, as an enemy. Actually, the sensory objects that we might be attached to, they're actually like our enemy.
Ini Megi Debi de la Inju Desidu Mela Reina Labat Sogirwa. Any Debiki yedin le Gabu Shena. Any make Laba Sawa Noshi Takana Tegiri la Yesarwa.
And then finally, the example is given of fire. If you put your hand in the fire, you're going to get burned. And similarly, then, if you are very attached to and if you pursue the sensory objects, you're going to experience pain.
Debi de la Injun Zesidu. Tan Giche, Neka Giche, Zu Zebo, Danimbo, Kalo Himbo, Tulo Yabo, Kosa, Pawa, Tezul Gabu Shena. Tendangumal Tanga Tema to Yemari. Shezan, Kozugi, negative benefit Tesula Sonotone, any and then Giche Tesula, Gabu Mevachi, Takishiguri, Shirona, Shena Yabo Yeres, Luduki, Tendejita, advice Tebare.
So then it says here, right, renounce all sensual pleasure. Renounce your attachment and desire for sensory objects. Here, Nagajuna is really encouraging us to do this. Please renounce this. That's what he's saying.
Tangazu tela diriti keje the song hogiri any Tewanda Wuyena, Tewa Kakeji Kama Chuzela Landigiris. Then the Sabu Shumena Koronso Keje Tenandigirwa.
So now we can finish here for today. And if there are any questions among the audience, then we can spend some time for Q&A. If there was anything that wasn't clear or that you'd like to hear more about, then you can discuss it with Kempela.
Mini Sunji Due.
Dola.
Then the Keja de Yabu Reson.
Yabu Reson.
Yeah. The Hero Janang, it's Gotangi Reson. And then also Matha Sayi Marwa.
Laza. Redo.
저 문제
Mhm. Re-
라
Mhm. Dai, 그러면서 제가 말해. If you have any questions, it's also okay if you write it in the chat and I can read it out to Kimpla.
저는 여보 고소해.
딱 건너 가봐도 이내야 디 뭐였어? 랑란 따고 얘기했나? 가고 쉬워지더라. 예.
다데 가르스나 런린 땅기 거룩이 후 제로와.
음.
가시 대화 구기에나 런린 따 구기로라.
맞아. 지워질 레이도. 예. 이제 döyen seyadik kareres dene 이중 je 원네 짜원 니네 빵고레스 세기어레베
다 슈나 아니 뽕구레스 가르스나 대화 구긴도와스. 아니 내야 세야데 주 제보 다힘보 트힘보 로힘보 트 트가모 아니 다 테솔 라이레 주 다 트로 리자 센데nga 세케이로와 테솔 란데스 데스나 테솔 기제네 desire development zo야에로 zon키에로 테솔 라이레 아코소에
그래서 so here if you can then renouncing fully your attachment to the sensory objects that would be the best because you want to be happy, right? And this is the way to be happy. Um, and the sensory objects, then the sensory pleasures are so the objects of our senses, right? So form, sound, smell, taste, and texture. So
아니
beautiful form, pleasant sound, um, good smell, delicious taste, and then sort of soft, smooth texture. These are the sensory pleasures, the sensory objects.
요난 데스야데 포지션 코난디레 파월 코난디레 네임 쉐임 테솔 코난디레
Or you could also interpret these sensory pleasures as, position, power, name, fame.
아니 닌주 라야데 안다 이유데 라야데 용 소소게 타칼라르고 세중구레스 오버존나 데기 칠라 오버존나 아니 강가테기리 세조로 나스 다 자부초로 제메키 에두 제메키 데기 디바조로 나스 데게 자코난 디시에사레
This numero tangero.
어 뉴르톤로 나스
Nas.
다 제메키 토라 사티스팩션 조로 나스 페나
So then here, I realize adding that renounce, we can also interpret it as please reduce your attachment. Please, have somewhat less desire for these kinds of things. Be a little bit more balanced, keeping in mind the negative downsides associated with these sensory pleasures. 다른 교재도 다 있네요. 그래서 대연에서 빵내 다 다른 셈들라 대차 예시르와 되는 대차 디키 되는 못하는 세파
알레
요르와 다
단디스 차바뽕 라야데 세네 뽕그를 라이에르마도 Si yugi gone pongo de la ye mari. Te hako ya kachimbundu.
No, so. So I just translated the follow-up question here in the chat. And Kempula's reply here is giving up attachment really means to do so mentally. You have to give up attachment with your mind. It doesn't work if you just run away physically from sensory pleasures. That's the idea here. Oh, la sota. Mi manche ki tata drogo wiya sare samme ki karinche tujiche nazo chat nang rola
Lazo
tigirba.
da nga zo shuma. Any sadi de la yon la giro che tuze yena. Any tuze chipare la shu.
Lazo. Okay, so thank you everyone. This will be it for today's session. We're so happy that you made it. And on Saturday, it'll be the same time again. Um, so please keep that
Thank
in
you very
mind.
much. Thank you, Kempola. Thank you, Olaf. Wonderful teachings. I really appreciate very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kempo.
Thank you.
Olaf. Thank you,
Hola.
everyone.
So,
Tashidele.
Azidele. Merci
Ashidele.
beaucoup.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.